This episode brought to you by MEEPLE your source for high-quality custom board game inserts. MEEPLE Realty, think inside the box.
Hey everybody, welcome to Board Online, Board Offline. Today we're bringing you our top 15 plus one favorite games of all time. Now this list showed up in mid to late June last year, but I actually created the list in May, just never got around to filming it. So May is going to be when the favorite games list generally shows up. With that in mind, I also want to go in and point out that as you're watching this, if you like any of the games you see, go down in the description below and click on the links down there if you decide you want to purchase one of these games. And by purchasing through those links, you'll be getting the game and then also helping out the channel a little bit in the process. So a couple of quick things as far as how I came to create this list. Last year I did a top 10 plus one. And this year I'm doing top 15 plus one. And the reason for that is when I'm making these lists, I feel like I should have no more than 20% of the games I've played represented. And this list of 16 actually represents around 17 or 18% of the total games I've played. And of course last year I played fewer games, which is why I only did a top 10 plus one. So as I keep expanding, my goal is to eventually get to where I can do a top 100, but I won't do that until I've played 500 games. So at this point, I've played either 87 or 88 games, so you're getting a top 15 plus one. So just know that any game that shows up on this list, I like a lot because it does represent the top 17 or 18% of what I have played. And as I was putting together this list, I did not go back and watch my previous list until after I had finalized this one. And that was mainly just to see where everything else had fallen last year. So as I built this list, I didn't really remember where everything fell. I remember there was a couple of games where I kind of knew where they were on the list, but for the most part I didn't know. And so this list was made fresh without that knowledge. So with all that in mind, let's get right to the list and see what my number 16 favorite game of all time is. Now, number 16 is a brand new entry to the list. This is Lords of Waterdeep. Now, this is a fairly basic, especially with just the basic worker placement game, but it is still a lot of fun. Basically, it is based in the Dungeons & Dragons universe. However, it is really just for thematic purposes. There's nothing else related to it. I mean, you are going to see, I guess, some of the characters that you'll see in the game are from that. Certainly a lot of the creatures and the different factions and stuff like that. And basically, you are one of the Lords of Waterdeep, and each of the different lords has their own type of mission they want to complete. And there's 5 different types of missions. You have commerce, skullduggery, warfare, piety, and Arcana. And you have certain ones that your lord that you are wants to focus on, and all the other players have their own lords as well. And that kind of gives a little bit of a hidden goal to the game, and you'll score extra points at the end of the game based on what your hidden goal is. But then also you're scoring points just by completing these quests, and the way you complete quests is by hiring warriors, rogues, clerics, and wizards. And they're really just these cubes, though I plan on upgrading that and making it look a little bit better than that. There's some pretty cool meeples you can get for the game. But you collect these cubes, and when you have the right number of cubes, you then complete the quest and you gain a reward. And a lot of times the rewards are thematic. I know there's one where you're the mission is to resurrect dead wizards, and so you have to get, I believe, 3 clerics. And then when you complete the mission, you turn in your 3 clerics, but you gain instead 3 wizard cubes. So that's pretty cool. And I've played this over 1,000 times on the app. I just recently got the actual physical board game though, which is why it just now is making my list. And I bought the expansion with it as well. And the expansion, by the way, really adds a lot of game to this game. It adds a corruption track, which has much more powerful abilities, but you gain corruption when you do those abilities, and so you have to weigh if it's worth getting, you know, the cubes faster that you need, or if but then you're going to lose points at the end of the game. Really cool idea there, and the more corruption that's spread out amongst everybody, the worse that corruption is for you. So Lords of Waterdeep is my number 16, a really cool worker placement game. My number 15 is Small World. Now this is a game that's been out for quite a while. This is also new to the list, and it is basically a area control game. However, it really adds replayability in that you have your different races, you know, dwarves, elves, ghouls, barbarians. I don't think barbarians are in the base game, but they are in an expansion, and a bunch of stuff like that, halflings. But then there's also a special ability. So every race has their own personal ability they get just because they are a halfling or they are an elf. But then there's these special abilities that are in a separate stack, and every game you shuffle up the races and the special abilities, and they get matched up together randomly, which really means you can get some really cool combinations out there. And as you're playing, you will, for 2 or 3 rounds, have the race that you're using, but then without a doubt, you're going to spread your race too thin. That's just the way you score points. I mean, it's going to happen. That's kind of the point of the game. And then you're going to put your race into decline, which means that they no longer are going to be doing anything. They're going to stay where they are, and you'll get a new race on the next turn, and you'll come in and start conquering again. And the more territory you have, the more points you get, but there's also other things, you know, there's certain special abilities that give you points for attacking other players, or special abilities that give you for controlling farmland or mountains or stuff like that. And this game plays up to 5 out of the base game. I believe there's a 6-player map. I will say that when I don't know that, I'm not sure if I've played with 5 before. I've definitely played with 4, and 6 might be too long of a game for what this brings to the table. But there's so much replayability in here, and if you start getting the expansions, there's so many cool expansions with new and cooler races and cooler special abilities. And then I believe there's extra maps you can get, and there's like an underground and a river. I don't have those two. I have a bunch of the a bunch of the expansions that have extra races, but just not the extra maps. Anyway, Small World is my number 15, a really, really fun area control game. You should definitely check it out. Number 14 is also new to the list, and this game I only recently got, and so I've only played it a couple times, so it's entirely possible that this is just Cult of the New getting this onto the list for me, but right now I am really enjoying it, and I'm looking forward to playing it with extra people. I've only played it solo so far. I'm looking forward to getting some extra people in. I think it's going to happen probably this upcoming weekend. We'll see. But this is Zephyr, Winds of Change. Now, this is a steampunk-ish aerial combat game, and now the combat is mostly abstracted out. It's not a tactical game. You're not moving around a board or anything like that. It's fully cooperative, and you have, I believe there's 5 different ships to choose from, and as you're playing, you're going to be upgrading your ship systems. You're going to be getting new crew members to join your ship. Different ships can hold different number of crew, and you're going to be upgrading your hull, and then you're going to be taking assignments, going on these assignments, fighting these different enemy ships. Sometimes enemy commanders will show up, and in the really tough missions, enemy warlords will show up, and the warlords will just, they're so difficult. Like I said, I've only played it solo so far. I think this game is going to offer even more interesting decisions when I play with multiple players. The components for this game are really, really nice. The ship mats actually are double layered. I'm not sure exactly how to describe it. Double layered, so there's like an inset where when you place the tokens for the different upgrades, they stay on the mat. They're not shifting around. They're inset in there, and that's really nice. I like that a lot. The ships are just standees, at least with the version that I got. I have seen on BGG some pictures of ship minis, so I don't know if that was probably like a Kickstarter bonus or something. I'm not sure exactly. But in the version that I've got, I think the standard version, it comes with ship standees, and they look nice. The artwork, The artwork has gotten a lot of hate from some people. I will say that maybe there's one or two, there might be a few of the people, the personality cards or the warlords, you know, in the game where the artwork is a little bit questionable. But for the most part, I really like the feel and the artwork and the aesthetic for this game. The ships, I think, look fantastic. But what it really comes down to is that it's got some very interesting gameplay. There is some dice rolling, but that is primarily for deciding how the bad guys, you know, which maneuver the bad guys are going to use, which attack, and also for deciding certain rewards. When it comes to the actual combat on your side, you have a large degree of control because it is card-based, and while I believe there may be a few cards where you roll dice to determine exactly how much damage, you're going to be able to do some damage for sure with the cards, and most of them are not dice rolling attacks or actions or anything like that. And you have attacks, you have maneuvers, and you have tech cards, and all those offer a lot of cool decisions. That's Zephyr, Winds of Change. My number 13 was on the list last year. Last year it was number 10, and last year I only did 11 total games. So this one has fallen a little bit. It would have fallen off the list if I was still only doing 10, but it is Star Wars Imperial Assault coming in at number 13. Now, part of why this game has fallen is I just simply have not played it very much. I played through most of a campaign and maybe about half of a campaign, and it became apparent that if one side knows what they're doing more than the others, it becomes a runaway leader problem pretty quickly. So I have not played another campaign since then. I actually have played the skirmish mode a couple of times and really enjoyed that. And it's just difficult to find somebody to continue or to frequently play that with. So right now, I haven't purchased anything else since that campaign, and I'm basically waiting for this app to come out. And I'm really hoping this app is going to solve a lot of the issues that I have. The app that Fantasy Flight is talking about is going to make the game fully cooperative. I think that if we take the Imperial player out of the mix and just play fully cooperative, that will provide a better experience without the issue of the runaway leader. Hopefully that, you know, the app is a little bit self-correcting in the difficulty. I don't know. We'll see. I'm holding on to it. I'm hoping that if that app comes out and it kicks butt, then Star Wars Imperial Assault is definitely going to be moving back up the list rather than down. As it stands right now, it's number 13 on my list, Star Wars Imperial Assault. Next up, we have another one from last year. Now, last year, this was number 8. It is now at number 12. This is Thunderstone Advance. A few things for why this game has fallen. I've played this game quite a bit. It's very high on my list of most played games of all time. But it is, I don't know, I think maybe I've played it so much that it's starting to wear out a little bit. We'll see if, you know, how many more plays this gets in the future. I'm very, very excited to try out Thunderstone Quest, which is the 3rd edition of Thunderstone. Thunderstone Advance is the 2nd edition. Thunderstone Quest recently had a Kickstarter. I almost backed it and ended up putting my money towards, well, I almost backed that, then moved my money over to Rising Sun, but then before Rising Sun ended, I moved my money from there over to Gloomhaven. So I guess technically, instead of Thunderstone Quest, I backed Gloomhaven. But when Thunderstone Quest comes out, I'm definitely going to be getting a copy of that. And Thunderstone Advance will remain one of my favorite games that I've ever played. It was, I believe, my first serious deck builder. I think I had Star Realms prior to Thunderstone Advance. But when I got Thunderstone Advance, I was just so enthralled with the way all the cards worked and going to the village or going to the dungeon. And you've got the monsters that come across the top of the board, and you're fighting against them, and you're working with the other players to get through that monster deck, but at the same time, you want to be the one who has the best score at the end of the game, which is largely based on the monsters you defeat. Fantastic game, Thunderstone Advance. My number 11 was on the list last year at number 7, and it's taken a bit of a dive, obviously. Only going down 4 ranks, but it's still, you know, a decent amount, and that's Dead of Winter. Now, Dead of Winter is another one of those games that I have played so much that might be part of why I just don't quite want to get at the table as often. I will say it is very popular with my main game group still, though recently we've gotten into Pandemic Legacy and we're working our way through that campaign, so Dead of Winter hasn't come out at that group either. But Dead of Winter is basically, you've got up to 5 people, I believe, all playing technically on the same team, but there may be a traitor, and you've got zombies that you're dealing with. But everybody has, even if you're not a trader, you have your own secret objective on top of the main objective. And that secret objective may force you, if you want to win, to hold back some supplies that you would give to the colony otherwise. And so then you deal with starvation, and you deal with crisis cards, and you deal with zombies. And then if you bring in the expansion, you've got bandits and mutant zombies. And there's just a lot going on here. And then, of course, the crossroad cards, where if you do certain thing, you won't know what it is, but if you do a certain thing, it'll trigger an event that occurs, and then all hell can break loose from that. A lot of cool ideas, a lot of cool decisions to make in Dead of Winter. One thing that I will say is that really when it comes down to it, essentially all that's going on in Dead of Winter is you are moving from here to here, searching through a deck of cards, and then also clearing out some zombies. If you distill it down to that, it doesn't sound like a great game. But the reason why, while those mechanisms by themselves are not necessarily fantastic, what really makes this game good is getting the interaction between other players and trying to figure out, is this person on my team? Are they acting strange because they have a secret objective card that requires them to do something that may be opposed to the best interest of the group? Or are they acting this way because they are actually a traitor? And that sort of tension really, some of my most distinct memories of gaming come from games of this game right here, Dead of Winter. Just with the crossroad cards, there was one where somebody ended up blowing up, because it was just very small chance that it would happen, and we kept convinced. We were like, hey, come on, if you don't blow up, then you are going to have a lot of stuff that we need for the colony. What's the worst that could happen? And he rolls the die, and he loses 2 of his characters in 1 die roll because of an explosion. Just some fantastic memories that go with this game, Dead of Winter. Number 10 is Pandemic. Now, interestingly enough, this was not on my list last year. And I think maybe the reason it wasn't was I included Pandemic and Pandemic Legacy together. But in retrospect, this game is different enough from Legacy that I feel like it needs its own slot. So number 10 is Pandemic, the regular base Pandemic. I do have the In the Lab expansion. And when I initially played In the Lab, I really felt like I would never play Pandemic without it again. And yet I found recently that whenever I do bring out just regular vanilla Pandemic, that's what I want to play. I don't add the expansion at all. I just play the base game. Now, since playing Pandemic Legacy, this game has really sat on the shelf quite a bit more. And I think that a lot of that is because Pandemic Legacy was such an incredible experience that it makes vanilla Pandemic kind of, it just doesn't quite cut it all the time when it's just my wife and I, because we're the ones that have played it the most. However, when we bring other people over, a lot of times this game is a great one to introduce them to. You're going around the world, you're on the same team, you're cooperative, so there's none of that tension of playing against somebody who knows the game well, because like I said, we do know this game very well. So you're on the same team, and you're fighting against these diseases that are ravaging the world. There's 4 different diseases, and you're trying to stop them before they do too much damage. And that is a theme that I feel like people really can enjoy. I feel like, when you put that theme out there, it's easier for people to say, oh yeah, I can wrap my head around that. I can get that. It's not, it's not a fantasy theme that some people might be initially apprehensive of. It's not a sci-fi theme or even a war theme. It is doctors and researchers working together to try to save the world. And I think that makes it super accessible. And I think that this is a game that when you add the cooperative nature to it, it's just an incredibly accessible game that lots of people enjoy. You can get non-gamers into it. It's not super complicated. That's Pandemic, my number 10. My number 9 was number 4 last year, and it has fallen only because I just don't get to play it. I don't own it, so I only get to play it when I'm, at one of my other game groups where they own it, or, that's pretty much it. And it is Blood Rage, which is from Eric Lang, who is an absolute genius, and I think you'll see him show up on my list again here shortly. Very shortly, actually. But Blood Rage is a Viking-based game, but Viking mythology, Norse mythology. With if you get the expansions, you definitely have the gods intervene, but then you also, in the cards themselves, a lot of them are named after the gods, and it's no dice in this game, even though it seems like it would be an Ameritrash style game, but it's really more about area control. But sometimes you don't have to control. Sometimes, based on the cards you play, it's better for your guys to get wiped out because you get points from that. And in the end of the game, the only thing that matters is who has the most victory points. And when your guys die, they go to Valhalla, and at the end of the round, Valhalla is released, and all those guys come back out and they're ready to fight again. And then you can recruit monsters, and when those monsters show up on the board, they do some serious damage. They can really swing the flow of the battle. It scales really well because you actually cover up different parts of the map based on how many, or different amounts of the map based on how many players are playing. And then each age, initially you're going to start with a map you got a certain number of regions on it, but each age, one region gets destroyed because it's Ragnarok, and different parts of this board are getting destroyed. And so once that's destroyed, then there's even less area for you to fight over, and so it makes the board feel more and more claustrophobic as it's collapsing down on you, and you just have to keep fighting for this small little territory as it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And when the game first starts, you feel like, oh, there's enough room for us to all get what we want. But then in the second age, there's less room. And in the third age, it is really just a all-out battle to try to scrape and get something so you can get those points. And it is a lot of fun. That's Blood Rage. Number 8 is that other game from Eric Lang I was just talking about. This is The Others, and this is a brand new game to the list. This game is one where I got it because it was on sale. I knew that I would like it. I hoped my wife would like it. You can never quite tell with her. She has particular taste. When she finds a game she loves it. But then if she doesn't like a game, she wants nothing to do with it. And so I got The Others. We played it one time, and at the end of that play, when she said, "We need to play this again," I was blown away. I was very excited that even when she likes the game, she rarely requests to play it again right away. My wife loves being the bad guy in this game, the sins player. And essentially the idea is that the 7 deadly sins have manifested in our world, or in a world kind of similar to ours, because there's werewolves and vampires and stuff, who, by the way, are the good guys in this game. Werewolves, vampires, those, half demons, they're all the good guys in this game. Meanwhile, the 7 deadly sins are just tearing up the world, and the game takes place in the city of Haven. The good guys are the Faith Team, and that stands for some crazy nonsensical acronym there, but the idea is those are good guys, and the sins player has just a legion of forces that come in. And every game, the sins player is going to have acolytes, which are corrupted humans, whether it's nuns or doctors or hobos, or in the expansion I just got, diplomats or gangsters. So they'll have one set of acolytes, and then they have abominations that are these crazy looking creatures, and then they have one controller, which is a more powerful creature than the abominations, and then above that is the avatar, the avatar of that particular sin. Now right now I only have the 2 base game sins. I have Pride and Sloth, but I plan to keep collecting the rest of them, and the minis look so cool. The one thing I'll say is that it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for the most part, why Pride looks the way it looks, or why Sloth looks the way it looks. There's not a whole lot of theming that went into what the models look like. That being said, the models are fantastic. I really like the acolyte models, the corrupted humans. Those are really cool. And then the hero models are great. And you know, there's a lot of cool ideas there. You know, you've got a werewolf in the base game, and then actually in the expansion I got, I didn't realize it came with a werewolf as well. But this werewolf can't control when she shifts. You know, one turn she'll be human, the next turn she's werewolf, and it just goes back and forth like that. She has no control over that. That's a cool idea too. But so the others, there's I think 7 scenarios in the base game, and each scenario has 2 different maps, and each of those maps have slightly different objectives in them. So a lot of replayability. Each of there's 3 different types of scenario, and each of those has a different feel. There's one that is all about mainly about killing stuff. There's one that's called a redemption story, which is about saving innocents. And then the third is a corruption story where your heroes actually have a dark past. And when they get to a certain level of corruption, which I believe is when they're maxed out on corruption, you flip that over and you see what happens. That's a cool idea too. A lot of great ideas here. Really enjoy it. It is a dice fest. And so if you're worried about luck of the dice, that's going to be in there. There's lots of ways to mitigate. You do have exploding dice as well, but it is still a dice fest. So keep that in mind. But that is The Others, my number 8. My number 7 is also new to the list, and boy, man, this one really rocketed up real fast. This is going to show up, I think, on my most played games of all time when I finally get back around to that, which will be in January. But it's definitely going to show up on my most played games of the past year, which comes out in July. This is Friday. When I got a hold of this game, I got it initially because I needed a game to play on an airplane, because I was flying out to Colorado, and I'd prefer to play a game if I can help it rather than watch movies or whatever. I got Friday. It barely fit on that airplane tray, by the way, but I managed to make it work with a little creativeness with how I did that. But in Friday, it is a solo-only game, and you are Friday from the Robinson Crusoe book. And Robinson Crusoe has crashed on your island, and he is completely ill-prepared for being able to survive on a island like that, on a desert. Well, it's not really deserted because you're there, but you get what I'm saying. So your whole job is to help Friday make it through dealing with these different hazards. And every time Robinson Crusoe, every time Crusoe successfully completes a hazard, you get a new card in your deck. And it's kind of cool because you have the hazard, and if you beat it, you flip it over, and there's your new card that gives you an ability. And you use that ability, and so it's a deck building game. You're going to be trying to call out the bad cards. Meanwhile, you're basically working through 3 different phases, green, yellow, and red. Each one gets progressively harder, and I mean, they get really difficult. And if you make it through the red phase, at the end are 2 pirates that you have to fight. Each of those either have special abilities or just are very difficult. And I have yet to beat, I think I played the game 14 times, haven't beat it yet, which means I suck, basically. And I'm playing on the easiest difficulty. There's also harder difficulty levels above that. I can't even imagine playing on those. But that is Friday, my number 7. My number 6 is Orleans. Well, this game was number 3 last year. It is a bag building worker placement game where you start with a certain contingent of workers, and you're going to place them out to get more. And as you're doing this, there's slowly different ways that you're going to build up your points. There's a progress track along the bottom of the main board. And as you go along that, it's a point multiplier, and you're placing out these, I believe they're called trading houses, because there's a map. And as you go around the map to different cities, you'll be collecting goods along the way, and you can build trading houses. The more trading houses you have, the more points you get at the end of the game. All the goods are worth certain points, but then there's also events in this event deck that occur, such as plague or trading day or taxes or any of that stuff that you have to deal with. And it's the same deck every time, so you know what's in there, but as it goes along, you're going to, it's slightly different order every time, so you have to be prepared, you have to be ready for whatever happens to come up in there. And that adds a little bit of a touch of luck to a game that otherwise is very much luck-free. Well, I mean, I say the game's luck-free, but really, I suppose with drawing your guys out of the bag, there is, of course, luck involved there, but you are in control of how that bag is set up. You control what the chances are for everything that you want to get out of the bag, and there's a way to cull unwanted workers from that bag, because you have different types of workers. You have the farmers, and you have fishermen, and several different things like that. So you can cull them from the bag and send them off to this I believe it's called the Good Works board, where over there you get a little bit of something, but if you can complete it, you get a citizen, and the citizens are the ones who also really add to your score at the end of the game. And there's other ways to get citizens as well, depending on how far up the different progress tracks for individual workers. There's progress tracks for that. And then there's things like if you have recruited the most farmers, then you're going to get a bonus at the beginning of every round for that as well. So lots of different little things going on here that add up to a total score at the end of the game. And it is a lot of fun. My wife and I have really enjoyed playing this 2-player. We've taught it to a few people as well who also have enjoyed playing this game. That's Orleans, my number 6. My number 5 is Xia Legends of a Drift System. Now, this game is a massive sandbox game where you are flying around in a single spaceship. You are your own person. I think Firefly or Han Solo. It's just you. You don't have a fleet, and you and your crew, I suppose. And you're flying around, completing either doing pickup and delivery missions, or perhaps bounty hunter missions, or assassination missions, or stuff like that. You're exploring this solar system that you're in, finding new planets. There's lawful planets. There's neutral planets. There's outlaw planets. There's asteroid belts you have to deal with. There's wreckage. You can go in there and try to salvage stuff from the wreckage, but you have to be careful because if you roll the wrong number, then you explode and there's nothing you can do about it. When you're going through the asteroid field, you have to roll a certain number, otherwise you get hit by asteroids, and you need to use your shields, otherwise you might take critical damage and die. You want to talk about luck heavy as far as, well, I wouldn't say luck heavy, but definitely the dice are everything in this game. For instance, if you roll a 20, a natural 20, then you get a victory point. Just plain and simple, just like that. And that's the type of game that this is. Now, there's all kinds of ways to mitigate the dice rolls. And on top of that, with the expansion that's coming out that should be here, I believe, next month, there's additional ways to mitigate the dice rolls. Cody Miller, who's the designer of Xia, is very active with his fan base and listens to a lot of things that are being said in the forums and finds ways to implement them in ways that won't drastically change his vision of the game. And I think that's pretty cool. There's just so much going on here, so many options. There's tons of pre-painted mini ships in the game, and you start with a tier 1 ship, and then you can upgrade to tier 2, tier 3, and when you upgrade, you keep your special ability from the previous tier. So you can kind of, by the time you get to tier 3, you've structured this ship with this toolbox of special abilities all your own, and that's a pretty cool idea too. So Xia just in general has a lot of great things going on. There's some things that will absolutely frustrate some gamers. It's definitely not a game for all gamers, but if you think that having this modular board with all these cool ships with cool abilities, and you don't mind a lengthier game, which by the way you could technically play at a lower victory point count, and then it'd be a shorter game. So you can adjust the game length, and I've done that several times. So much going on here, a lot of cool decisions with a decent dose of luck, and I think that's okay. That's Xia, my number 5, which, oh, by the way, Xia was number 2 last year. I have a feeling that when this expansion comes in, it may boost back up again. The expansion, by the way, allows for solo play. That's something I'm very excited for as well. Xia, Legends of a Drift System, my number 5. So next up, our number 4 is Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. Now, 2nd Edition wasn't even out when my previous list came out, however, or at the very least I didn't have it. However, 1st Edition was on the previous list, and it was listed at number 6. So you can kind of make a comparison there. Not really, because there's quite a bit of difference between the two games. Particularly the fact that in the 2nd edition you have an app that controls the Keeper. The Keeper was essentially the Overlord or the Dungeon Master. The bad guy is what the Keeper was. And so now the app takes care of all of that and takes care of some of the more tedious bookkeeping stuff that was going on in first edition of Mansions of Madness. So basically, it's a Cthulhu game, of course. You are an investigator. You have up to 5 players, I believe, playing investigators, and you're taking turns going through a mansion, or in this game, actually, there's a town area, not the full town, but an area of a town where you go outside, inside, different buildings, all this kind of stuff. And you're trying to figure out what's going on, basically. You don't even really know for sure what your objective is at the beginning of the game. And as you play the scenario, you uncover the mysteries of what's going on, and eventually you figure out what your objective is going to be. The longer it takes you, not in real time, but in turns, the longer it takes you, the more things ramp up. And so you really have to balance exploration with having a sense of urgency with getting your mission completed. It's a lot of fun. Very tense. I will say I'm a little concerned because when Mansions of Madness first came out, there was quite a bit of communication from Fantasy Flight and additional content coming out. There's one actual expansion, a couple of boxes that brought in first edition stuff into second edition, and then some downloadable content as well. And in the past 3 or 4 months, there's really not been a whole lot going on. Now, hopefully that means they're just working on a significant content drop all at once. But the fact that the app has downloadable content available and they've only taken advantage of that once, I believe, that does make me a little bit concerned. Hopefully that doesn't mean that they're going to be, that for whatever reason they've decided to show less support for the game. But the game is doing fairly well, so I don't think that's going to be the case. Regardless, the game is fantastic. I love it. The only issue that some people have is the replayability, since you basically, the general gist of a scenario after you play it the first time. However, there are things that change. There are different layouts for a lot of the maps, and on top of that, there's different things will show up in different places on the maps, even though the overall storyline is the same. So, there's that, but I have played several of the maps multiple times and enjoyed them every time. That's Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. My number 3 is Mechs vs. Minions. This is new to the list. Wasn't out last year when this list came out, and this game kind of came out of nowhere for me. I'll be honest, when I heard the name of the game, for whatever reason, I heard the name of the game probably, I don't know, a month or maybe 3 weeks prior to actually seeing what the game was. I heard the name and I completely dismissed it. For whatever reason, the name didn't catch me. Then I saw the Watch It Played unboxing of the game, and I immediately knew I had to have it. And that was quite an adventure, just getting a copy in the first wave of this game, because for those of you who don't know, the Riot Games website, which was the only place you could purchase it, completely got swamped and crashed when everybody, because they had given a specific date and time that the game was going to be available for pre-order, and it just completely crashed the website when everybody showed up at the same time to try to get a copy. Regardless, this game is so cool, and I'm not going to spend any time talking about the production value. Anybody that's ever talked about this game has talked about that, so if you know about the game, you know that the production value is off the charts. Fantastic. So beyond that, the game is a programming game, fully cooperative, where you're playing against just literally 100 minions come in the box, and I've had almost all of them on the board at one time. It is insane when you see the minions swamp the board, and you and the other Yordles are fighting against them, and just hopefully laying waste to them. But it doesn't even really matter, because as you lay waste, they're going to come right back. Not all of them all at once, but man, when the scenarios all have escalation moments where you do something that causes what the minions are doing to escalate, and a lot of times that will double or triple the number of minions that are coming out, and then you have various mission objectives. I've actually only played through mission 5 just for various reasons. We've kind of stalled out there, my wife and I, and so instead I've gotten other missions in with other groups. and hopefully I will be able to get past mission 5, because with the other groups we're playing in mission order as well, and so I wanted to start back at the beginning of the campaign. Whatever the point is, I'm very excited to get past that mission 5 and keep opening the envelopes, because the missions come in envelopes that are sealed, so you can't cheat and peek ahead unless you're gonna, open those envelopes before you're supposed to, and that just kind of goes against my nature. I have to open the envelopes when I'm told to. So, so much good stuff in this game. I'm trying to think what else I can tell you about it. It's just a really, really fun game that isn't super complicated to get into, but has lots of good decisions once you are into it. That's mechs versus minions. My number 2 this year was number 5 last year, and that is Pandemic Legacy. Now, Pandemic Legacy recently has come back into my world because the wife and I finished Pandemic Legacy a while back, but then one of my game groups, a member of that game group, had not heard of Pandemic Legacy, was walking around in a store, saw it, and then asked me about it, and then as I described it to the group, they decided, hey, this might be something that we'd all like to play. So we pitched in together, bought a new copy of it, and now we've just started the Pandemic Legacy campaign, which is pretty exciting to be going through it a second time. For those of you who don't know, this is what a legacy game is basically you are making permanent, unalterable changes to the game every time you play it. Whether it's stickers on the board, whether you're ripping up cards, whether you're adding new card or stickers to the cards or stickers to the board, all these things are permanent and cannot be changed. And while initially that sounds, when I first heard about Legacy, it was back with Risk Legacy, and the idea of ripping up cards really, I was very much opposed to the idea initially, and then the more I thought about it and I saw that these games were popular, and Risk Legacy was getting a lot of good reviews, even though it was a Risk game, I thought, well, maybe I need to try it out. And Pandemic Legacy was the one that I tried out first, and there is a different feeling when a decision you make might force you to rip something up and destroy it, and not just remove it from the game for that game, or not just remove it and then if one day you want to come back and bring it back in because you're going to reset, then fine, it's there. No. If you have to destroy it, it changes the way you feel about the decisions you're making. It changes the way you feel about everything in the game, and it is a visceral feeling. It's hard to describe other than to say that it is very different, and the Pandemic Legacy takes that pandemic formula and adds meaningful and permanent decisions to the mix, and it really, really works. Played 2 games with the new group. I believe I played either 18 or 19 games with my wife, and played 2 games with the new group. I have basically told them that when it comes to any important decisions, I'm going to let them make those, because some of them are going to have serious consequences down the road, and I don't want my knowledge of what's coming up to affect that. And it is a lot of fun to watch them struggle with certain decisions. And granted, we're only, like I said, 2 games in, so they haven't had a whole lot of really difficult decisions yet, but they're coming, and that's going to be a lot of fun to see how this one pans out. And yeah, something that was kind of cool, side note with Pandemic Legacy, is in the first game, and this isn't really a spoiler because it's a slight spoiler, so skip ahead about 60 seconds if you don't want to hear it, but in the very first game of Pandemic Legacy, one of the diseases mutates and becomes more difficult to deal with. And in the Pandemic Legacy campaign that I played with the wife, it was the black disease. And then in this one, it also again was the black disease. So that was interesting. I thought that even though 2 different groups, 2 different sets of decisions, 2 different sets of first games, the same disease ended up mutating, just based off of chance, I guess. But I'm going to be, because of that, I'm now interested to see how we deal with it better, because it really kicked our butts when it was me and the wife. So we'll see what happens. Number 2, Pandemic Legacy. And my number 1 favorite game of all time, was #1 last year. It has not been dethroned, and that is Mage Knight, the board game. If anything, it has solidified itself in that spot because I now have all 3 expansions, which I have actually the third one, Shades of Tesla, I haven't even gotten to play with yet. I have played with the other 2, Lost Legion, which adds this figure, General Volker, General Volker, I believe is his name, and he basically walks around the board. Depending on what the mission is, he's either questing for, I can't remember what the one mission is because I've mainly played with the one where he's looking for the city. You and him both are searching for the city and the core tiles, and whichever one of you gets there first has the best chance of winning. If he gets to the city, he wins and you lose, period. If you get to the city first, you gotta take the city and then defend it from Volker. Very, very cool idea there. Volker replaces the dummy player, which I also like because it feels like there's an actual enemy to deal with there as opposed to the dummy player, which is just a timer. Volker still acts as a timer. He has his own deck, but his deck operates differently than the dummy player deck did. On top of that, Volker is an enemy that you can deal with both as in a solo game, a cooperative game, or a competitive game with other players. And that's pretty cool that no matter how you're playing the game, you can use Volker. Or if you play in the scenarios that came in the base game, you can shuffle Volker's camp in with the city tiles, and then he ends up acting as a city, but just with a slightly different way that you have to deal with him because Volker attacks you as well as has the minions and monsters that are in his army, and the number of them is based on the level that he is as well. All of that creates a really cool dynamic with how he works. And of course, there was new monsters that came with the Lost Legion expansion. Then I got the Krang expansion, which really is just adding a character, and I'll say this is the least value for your money out of the 3 expansions. But Krang himself is a really cool, I really like him as a character, as a hero, and he brings some interesting ideas to the table as far as what his hero powers are and his abilities and all that stuff. And it's been a lot of fun to play with him, and he is, I want to say he's either my second favorite hero. He's making a run for my money for first favorite hero. What's his name? The elven hero from the base game. See, he's my favorite now, and I can't remember his name right offhand. Anyway, he's the one that, in my opinion, is probably like the most stuck up of the heroes, but he's my favorite because he has tons of influence built into his deck and makes it easier for him to recruit. So he's probably my favorite still, but Krang is right there running for first place and is in solid second place. Then the Shades of Tesla expansion comes with another hero, Brevilar, I think is how you pronounce his name. Have not gotten to play with him yet. I'm going to get a game of that in soon, I hope. Probably this weekend or next week. However, that expansion also brings in a bunch of new enemies. And the enemies are now split into 2 different factions, which affects, I believe that affects the reward you get for defeating them. I have to read, like I said, I have not played with Shades of Tesla yet. I got to read through the rule book that came with that because there's a couple of different rules. But it also comes with new scenarios as well, which is really cool. So now, between the base game, Lost Legion, and Shades of Tesla, there are a ton of scenarios to choose from. Man, Mage Knight there's so much going on in Mage Knight. There's so many options and variations in how you play the game. Such a good game, and it is a long game. I mean, as are a number of my favorites here. Mage Knight, Mansions of Madness, Zaya are all very long games. I believe with Mage Knight, I've spent over 44 hours playing it. Mansions of Madness over 22 hours. Zaya over 18 hours playing the game. So you can see that there is some lengthy time spent playing some of my favorite games, and Mage Knight is solidly a #1. Definitely check it out if you like heavy, slightly deck building, games with lots of critical thinking that go into how you're going to, because that's one key thing with Mage Knight is the cards that you play from. You'll look at them and you'll see initially, okay, this is probably what I should do. But then if you keep looking, you're almost always going to find one or two additional ways you can play the cards and get similar results, but maybe in a more efficient way. And that is really where the fun in Mage Knight comes from, is puzzling through how you're going to play those cards to maximize your deck's efficiency and abilities. So my number one is Mage Knight, the board game. So there you go. Those are my favorite games of all time. I hope you enjoyed this list. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you like my channel, consider subscribing, and you can find other great top 15 plus ones, top 10 plus one, and my top 3 and 3 all on this channel, along with other great content. Be sure to check all that out and follow me over on Twitter at boredoffline. And until next time, if you're bored online, board offline.